Do you have heart disease or you fear you might develop it because you have a family history? Have you ever been told that your blood pressure or cholesterol are too high? If you're like most people over 40 here in America, you probably answered yes on one of those questions. And I'm so excited to be here today and to tell you that you don't have to fear heart disease because there's so much you can do to prevent it. And even if you already have it, you can reverse or even cure it through lifestyle changes. I'm going to talk about studies that scientifically proved that this can be done. I'm a registered nurse. It's my profession to know about this subject. However, I became personally interested because of my husband. My husband Mark has a family history of heart disease. His grandma died at 40 from heart attack, and his dad died at 53. Unfortunately, our children never met their grandpa. Uh, One time I was reading a book to our 3-year-old son, and there was a picture of an old couple. I pointed at an old lady and I said, I actually asked him, my son, where's grandma? And he pointed at the old lady and I asked, where is grandpa? And he didn't know what to answer. He doesn't even know what the word grandpa means. So I was very interested in helping my husband, but we kind of like really didn't. We just wanted to live healthy, but like most people, we kind of postponed it until on one checkup, my husband discovered that his cholesterol is elevated and his blood pressure is elevated in pre-hypertensive range. So it was kind of wake up call. We made a lot of changes. We learned a lot. I went to conference and classes to learn how to about the latest research and about how to make the heart healthy food tasty. So we transformed our lifestyle. As a result of just lifestyle transformation, my husband's cholesterol went down, and his blood pressure is normal right now. And in addition, he also lost a lot of weight, and we both feel much better. So I wanted, as a nurse, I wanted to share all this knowledge that I have about heart disease, heart healthy lifestyle with my patient, but this short time that I had for every patient was not enough. So I had to create a new format of patient education, and I founded the School of Heart Healthy Living. It's an online program that helps to start living heart healthy. So I'm going to share today a few things that our students are learning in the School of Heart Healthy Living. So today we're going to talk about few things that our students are learning in the School of Heart Healthy Living. We're going to talk about what happens inside of our body when the heart disease is developed, so we better understand the process. Secondly, we're going to talk about what we can do to prevent and even reverse this process based on the studies that demonstrate that this can be done. And third, we're going to talk about tips on how to make this type of lifestyle attractive and food tasty. So heart disease is almost norm in the West. We so got used to it. However, there are parts of the world where it's virtually non-existent. Northern Mexico, rural China, other parts, other nations, they don't have heart disease. When scientists look at this phenomenon, they try to understand why. It's the conclusion that they make is that the diet is the main reason, the main difference. By their culture and traditions, those nations are plant-based, so they do not consume the building blocks that lead to heart disease. We really got a chance to see what the difference the diet can make on the health of the arteries during the war. During the Korean and Vietnam War, the autopsies of soldiers were analyzed for the condition of their arteries. And what was observed is that for American soldiers, an average age of those soldiers is 20, 80% of them had gross evidence of atherosclerosis and early coronary heart disease. By contrast, Korean and Vietnam soldiers had only 1 to 3% of the cases with atherosclerosis. At that point, Korea and Vietnam lifestyle was not westernized. The similar study was done in this country when about 40 years later, the young people died from accidents, suicides, homicides. The young people 17 to 34 years old, when the autopsies was done on them, it was reported that all of them had signs of coronary heart disease at that young age. Is it our genes or is it a way of life? There's another historical example that can give us answers. In World War II, when Germans occupied Norway, one of the first things they did, they took away their livestock. They took away cattle, sheep, cows, turkeys, chickens to feed their troops. So all of a sudden, the nation of Norway became plant-based. And it's so interesting when we look at the rate of heart disease. If you look at the graph, you see that before the war, Norway had high rates of heart disease, just like the rest of the Europe. And then in 1940, there is an amazing thing that happens. At the middle of hostility, the rate of heart disease goes down. It dramatically drops. And then starting in 1945, the rate goes back to normal. So the war ended, and back came the meat, dairy, chickens, and back came circulatory disease. Who knew that Germans were the greatest public educators in Europe? So how can we explain that? Let's look inside of our body and see how the heart disease develops. Inside of our arteries, we have cells called endothelial cells. The condition of those cells is one of the most important factors for the circulatory health. Those endothelial cells, when they can become sticky when we eat fat food, hamburgers, pizzas, milkshakes, those endothelial cells become sticky. In addition, those foods are high in cholesterol and saturated fat. Body transforms saturated fat into cholesterol. Bad LDL cholesterol is sticky. It sticks to endothelial cells. And that's how the plaque starts to form. So the plaque inside of the arteries is growing with every meal high-fat meal that we consume. So we eat more of those bad food that I mentioned, and the plaque grows. One day, the plaque ruptures. That's how 90% of the heart attacks occur. The plaque ruptures, it blocks the circulation, so all downstream organs stop receiving blood with its oxygen and nutrients. So part of the body, brain or heart starts to die. So we see those unhealthy food, they cause long-term damage in terms of they build up plaque slowly. They also may give short-term damage. One of the very important parameters of the health of the arteries is their ability to dilate. When the arteries dilate or relaxes, it makes blood pressure go down, and it's much easier for the heart to pump, because heart is a pump. If it pumps against some constricted artery, it's hard. Pumping against relaxed, dilated artery is easy. We want arteries to be able to dilate. There's a test called brachial artery tourniquet test that can measure the artery's ability to dilate. So the artery is closed with a tourniquet, and there's no circulation for 5 minutes. After that, tourniquet is released, and ultrasound measures how well the artery dilates. In normal person, it dilates about 30% more than before. So what we see is that a single meal affects artery ability to dilate. In a study, half of the subjects went to a fast food place characterized by golden arches, and they had sausages and french fries. After that, the test was done about 2 hours later, and those subjects, their arteries were not dilating adequately. The other half of the group had a whole grain meal, their arteries were just fine. The first half of the group, of course, a few hours later, their arteries recovered. They went back to normal. However, we know that what those people are going to do. They're going to go home, they're going to have ice cream, they're going to have bacon and eggs, they're going to have potato with a lot of butter and cheese and the vegetable soaked in butter. So it looks like we constantly hammer, constantly beat up our endothelial cells. No wonder we get signs of heart disease at 17. Not enough to cause any symptoms, not enough to cause a heart attack, but we're on the road there. So obviously now you're probably asking, okay, I understand I don't want to damage my endothelial cells. What can I do to protect them? There are cells called endothelial progenitor cells, and what they do, they replace injured endothelial cells. So obviously, we want more of those endothelial progenitor cells. They're made in bone marrow, and we can measure their levels. If you measure the level of those cells in someone who is obese, who smokes, has high blood sugar, has high blood cholesterol, blood pressure, the level will be low. Someone who is an opposite of that, who has normal weight, who has exercises regularly, who has normal blood sugar, blood cholesterol, normal blood pressure, their levels will be high. So, obvious conclusion: we want to remove those risk factors, and especially smoking, because smoking is very modifiable risk factors. Also, we want to have normal weight, we want to have normal blood pressure, normal cholesterol, normal blood sugar. Those are well-known risk factors. We want to control those. And there is something else you can do on top of that. There was a study done on some of the healthiest human on Earth, Okinawa women ages 17 to 34. So half of the study had their regular diet, and another half had 5 extra servings of green leafy vegetables a day. At the end of the study, the group with green leafy vegetables had strikingly higher levels of endothelial progenitor cells. So you already can guess what we're going to discuss as a treatment. So if you look at the process of how the heart disease develops, you can see there's so much you can do to stop this process. There is so much you can do to decrease the plaque formation. You can make your arterial cells strong by changes in your lifestyle. In fact, if you make all of those changes, you can make yourself heart attack proof. And that has been demonstrated in a number of studies. The most famous doctors who demonstrated that in their patients are Dr. Assassin and Dr. Ornish. But there are other ones who did similar studies. What those doctors did, they took patients who were who had very severe heart conditions. In fact, many of those patients were giving no hope from their primary doctors because their condition was so severe. They failed their bypass or stents, and they were actually kind of giving only short time to live. The doctors seriously addressed their lifestyle. They had their patient to follow whole food, plant-based, very low-fat diet. Many of those doctors had patients practice stress management and have used regular moderate exercise. And the results were amazing. Those patients who were giving no hope from the traditional medicine started to improve. They started to have less and less symptoms. They started to feel so much better, so quickly, much more quickly than we would expect. In fact, not only they were feeling better, they were better because imaging studies demonstrated that the plaque in the arteries started to decrease, and in some cases it was completely gone. Those discoveries they transformed the way we look at cardiovascular disease. Those discoveries can have the same huge impact on our lives as discoveries of antibiotics, as discoveries of vaccines.